The road stretched like a ribbon, disappearing into the autumn fog. The car glided smoothly along the narrow highway as I approached my new home. A home that I had bought for next to nothing. The realtor had told me it had been abandoned for many years, that no one wanted to take it, even for such a low price. I didn't pay much attention to the reasons. I needed a house me own corner, my own space, my own silence. I was tired of the endless noise of the city, of the countless faces, of the job that was burning me out from the inside. I felt the need for solitude, and when I stumbled upon the listing, something inside me clicked. It was as if the house had been waiting for me. When I turned onto the driveway, the view unfolded before me. A gray stone house standing at the edge of the forest. The windows were dark, the roof sturdy but weathered, and the yard overgrown with tall grass. I turned off the engine and lingered for a moment, just looking at it. Something about this house felt familiar. I stepped out of the car and approached the front door. The key turned in the lock surprisingly easily, as if someone had been using it often before me. Crossing the threshold, I felt the house inhale. You know that feeling, when a long empty room suddenly fills with movement, with sounds, with the warmth of a human presence. The air inside seemed to come alive, accepting me. It was dark inside, smelling of dampness and old wood. I flicked the light switch near the entrance and nothing. The lights didn't work. I turned on my phone's flashlight and began my inspection. The house was bigger than I had expected. A spacious living room, a narrow hallway leading to several rooms, a staircase to the second floor, and what I liked most of all, a staircase leading down to the basement. I walked through the rooms, memorizing the layout. There was almost no furniture, but a few old things remained. A dust-covered dresser with peeling handles. A chair in the corner, upholstered in faded fabric. A painting on the wall, a blurry landscape with a dark silhouette of a house eerily similar to this one. In the kitchen sink, there was an old mug. Strange, weren't the cleaners supposed to remove everything before the sale? I picked up the mug. It was cool to the touch, as if someone had held it just recently. I peeked into one of the bedrooms. Almost empty, except for a massive metal hook protruding from the ceiling right in the middle of the room. I froze. The hook was strong, rusted, but still clearly capable of holding considerable weight. I lowered my gaze and noticed an unusually clean patch of floor directly beneath it, as if someone had scrubbed it thoroughly, trying to wash something away. A troubling feeling slid down my spine, but I quickly brushed it off. Maybe the previous owner had a chandelier or a workout machine hanging here. I tried to convince myself. I closed the door and decided not to think about it anymore. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hook wasn't random. That it was waiting for me to return. The first night. I slept poorly on my first night in the house. Normally, I fall asleep quickly, but here, in this silence, something felt off. It wasn't the cozy, peaceful silence of the countryside. It was a silence that listened. I tossed and turned in bed, constantly catching myself on the feeling that something wasn't right. Then I heard it. A faint scraping sound, as if someone was slowly dragging a piece of metal across stone. The sound was coming from below, from the basement. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding faster. Scraping again. My fists clenched involuntarily. A deep breath. It's just an old house. The floorboards creak. The pipes make noise. It's all logical. I repeated this thought several times, and slowly, threw off the blanket. I needed to make sure. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light caught the staircase leading down. The basement. Dark, deep. The air was damp, thick, carrying a faint metallic scent. I swept the flashlight across the walls, bare stone, with traces of old shelving in some places. In the corner, there was a wooden workbench, cluttered with old tools, a hammer, pliers, dusty cans filled with nails. But my gaze was immediately drawn to a metal box against the far wall. It was massive, with rusted hinges and a sturdy lock, long corroded with time. Something about... I approached, lifted the lid. It was locked. I looked around the basement, and my eyes caught onto a shelf. A massive hammer lay there. I picked it up, stepped closer to the chest, and took a deep breath. The first struck a dull thud against the metal. The second, the lock cracked. I threw the lid open and froze. Inside, chaotically arranged, lay tools. Rusty pliers, long needles, metal hooks, forceps that looked surgical. Some items were wrapped with wire, and in the corner, I saw straps with buckles. I carefully pulled one out. It was worn, but strong. A strap meant to bind someone tightly. A strange sense of recognition washed over me. I've seen this before. A wave of warmth hit my chest. I forced myself to take a deep breath. "What is this?" I whispered under my breath. But instead of an answer, an image flashed in my mind. Not a memory, not a recollection. A flash. Someone screaming. Skin rubbing against metal. Eyes filled with fear. I squeezed my eyes shut and abruptly stood up, slamming the chest shut. Number. Just old junk, left behind by the previous owners. Just worthless trash. And yet, my fingers gripped the strap too tightly. And in that darkness, I suddenly felt at home. I woke up because the basement door was open. I clearly remembered closing it before bed. But no, it stood wide open. I slowly sat up in bed, my breathing unsteady. Anxiety pulsed in my chest. Still feeling the texture of the strap in my hands, I instinctively looked at my fingers. Reddish marks remained on the skin, as if I had been gripping something too hard. I ran my tongue over my dry lips. My body felt heavy, my head like it was filled with lead. Something was seeping into my consciousness, but I couldn't quite grasp it. I had seen this chest before. I had held these tools before. And for some reason, their presence didn't repulse me. It calmed me. I stood up, walked to the kitchen table where I had left the box with the things I found in the basement. I didn't notice it at first. But beneath the tools, there was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. My heart stopped. It was a photograph. I recognized the house in the picture. It was this very house. But in the center of the frame stood a man in a hood. I ran my finger over the image until my gaze locked onto his face. The eyes. I recognized those eyes. They were my eyes. The room blurred before my vision. Flashes of strange scenes exploded in my mind. Metallic clanking. Muffled screams. A hook in the ceiling. The smell of hot iron. I sank into a chair, my fingers digging into the tabletop. Why don't I remember this? But deep inside, I knew the truth. I was coming home. This house was not new to me. I was coming back. I couldn't move. My head throbbed, my chest tightened as if I was suffocating. The photograph with my face lay on the table, while in front of my eyes flashes of screams from another time danced like ghosts. No, not someone else's screams. I had heard them before, a quiet noise, like someone carefully stepping onto the stairs. I raised my head and stared into the dark hallway. Silence. I tried to tell myself that the house was settling, that it was just my nervous system acting up, but my hands were trembling too much. A faint creak. I stood up slowly. My phone was in my pocket. I turned on the flashlight and cautiously stepped into the hallway. The light illuminated the old wooden floor, but there was nothing there. No one. But I knew. I felt that someone had been here, breath on my neck. I turned around, and suddenly, I felt breath behind me. The air was dense, like before a storm. I didn't have time to turn around. Suddenly, a scream exploded inside my head. No, please don't. I stumbled and collapsed onto my knees, covering my ears. But the sound didn't disappear. It wasn't just in my head. It was in this house. I saw it. I saw the room with the hook. I remembered hands wiping the floor, scrubbing away sticky stains. I remembered loosening the clamps, releasing a body that was no longer moving. It was me. I had done this. The voices would not stop. Please, I won't tell anyone. I'll do anything. Just not this. Not this. They won't know, I swear, please. They're please. I had heard them before. No. I made them say it. I taught them to fear. The truth won't let me go. I clutched my head, my body shaking with convulsions. No. But the truth refused to let me go. I was not the new owner of this house. I was the one who had always been here. I was not the one who bought it. I was the one who lived here. I was the one who built it. I was the one who remembered every sound, every mark, every drop. I was the one who tortured people in this house. I jerked up and rushed to the bathroom. I turned on the light, looked into the mirror. A wave of nausea hit me. I recognized myself. But the face in the reflection, it wasn't mine. It was the man from the photograph. But now, I saw him without the hood. His eyes stared directly at me. His lips curled into a smile. I couldn't take it. The mirror shattered as my fist crashed into it. From the shards, the same face looked back at me. My face. But now, I could no longer turn away from the truth. I was coming home. I gasped for air, realization choking me. A dull ringing in my temples, hands trembling, my mind torn between two extremes. Run. Accept the truth. But where would I run? From myself? I stood over the shattered mirror, staring at my own fractured reflection just as broken as my reality. I tortured people here. I killed here. And I was coming back. I didn't remember right away. But now that the truth had escaped, I couldn't forget it. The room with the hook. The leather straps. Metal biting into flesh. Every time they started with begging. Then the screams. Then their voices disappeared. But I remembered everything. I looked into their eyes. And at some point, They realized there was no point in pleading, that no one would hear them, that no one would save them. Just like me, I slowly sank to the floor. This house didn't just belong to me. It was me. I lived within its walls. I left my marks on its floors. I washed away the blood that wasn't mine. I buried my life here. And now I had returned, a choice without a choice. I could have run, left everything behind, but I knew I had nowhere to go. This house was my final refuge. I could have erased my memory again, like before. But this time, something stopped me. I could feel the house breathing, like it had opened its arms. It wasn't angry. It wasn't threatening. It was simply waiting for me to begin again, welcoming the past. I slowly stood up, walked down to the basement, opened the metallic chest, took one of the tools in my hands. The cold metal felt warm. It was familiar. It was mine. My fingers instinctively tightened around the handle. I remembered how to use it. I knew how everything worked. And then, a knock at the door. I froze. Someone had come. I lifted my gaze. The house was alive. The walls were watching me. I wiped my hands on an old cloth. Slowly, I walked to the door. My fingers wrapped around the handle. I knew who it was. I had been waiting for them. I smiled. The knock came again. I stood there, hand resting on the cold metal handle, feeling how the house was coming to life with me. This was not just my home. This was me. It had been waiting for me, just as I had been waiting for this moment. A knock. I slowly turned the handle. The door opened. A man stood on the doorstep. Middle-aged, wearing a dark coat, his gaze cautious. "Hello. Sorry to bother you. I'm your new neighbor. Just wanted to introduce myself." His voice was nervous, but he tried to sound friendly. I smiled. How interesting. He narrowed his eyes, confused by my words. I stepped closer, looking directly into his eyes. I saw fear. Faint, almost unconscious. A human instinct. He could sense something was wrong, but he didn't understand what it was yet. "Nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand. "Come in." He hesitated. For a moment, his gaze flicked toward the car parked by the sidewalk. He was thinking, should he accept or refuse? Should he run or stay? Whatever choice he made, the house had already decided for him. I took a step back, leaving the door open. "Come on in. Don't be shy." He hesitated. I watched as he swallowed hard, his fingers twitching. He didn't know what to do. And then, he nodded and stepped inside. The door slammed shut. I smiled wider. The house was alive again. How wonderful it feels to be home. How wonderful it feels when the work continues.